respected.
To focus on something greater than you. It's like you have the idea that, yes, sometimes it feels like you're just going through the motions, but my train derailed, sorry.
It's all right. So true worship comes from the heart, and it's something that we're giving. Go ahead.
Of course, sometimes worship would be things that we would say to God, maybe in words or maybe in prayer or maybe in song. But you know, the Bible also defines worship as silence before God, being still, learning to be silent. You really, to grow as we should, you have to have periods of silence where you after you've studied the Word, you just sit there and you meditate and you just, and that's something that in our society people don't like to do, is to, never be silent or be quiet. But that is, I used to think it was strange that the Quakers, when they assemble, they don't do anything. They sit. They all gather, they just sit there quietly. And I did it for a long time. I thought, what are they doing? But that's their idea of worship. They just come in and they just, if somebody wants to say something in the congregation, they'll just stand up and quote a verse or make some admonition, then sit back down. And most of the time they're just quiet.
Yeah.
And I understand now, we're quiet during the Lord's Supper. Everybody is meditative and silent, some places say that we should sing Jesus Loves Me or something during the Lord's Supper, but I think silence is a much better worship.
Yeah, so worship can take several forms, and sometimes we can worship in silence or in reverence. Be still and know that I am God. And we need to be quiet and reverent and humble and meditate. All right, one more.
Yeah, so I think a lot has been said about being in the right mindset, which I completely agree with. We think spirit and in truth, but I also think I would define it as duty. And I tend to focus on this a lot because I think in our society, whether people have the mindset the right way, a lot of times, even in a true sense, people have an attitude that they want to worship, but they have the duty part incorrect. And then you have other people who simply don't get in the right mindset in large part because they have a lack of sense of duty. And so when you have that sense of duty, you have a desire to please the one that you have a duty to. For instance, all of us, who have jobs and have a boss you work for, or a company you work for, you have a sense of duty. And that's that you want to meet your responsibilities, you want to please the people that you work for. You want to do well because you have a duty to them. Same way with God. Obviously, we have to be in the right mindset, but we also have to approach it with a sense of duty. And I would also think that along this lines, if we have that sense of duty and obligation, I get that we have to be in spirit and in truth, so our mindset has to be there too. But I think if you talk to a lot of people who maybe you grew up with in church and they've fallen away, that lack of obligation, that lack of duty fell away. And it's some people that you talk to that may have had some times of struggle, but they had that sense of obligation that, well, I need to be there even if I don't feel the best today, even if I'm not completely in the right mindset. That eventually works itself out if you keep that sense of duty and obligation. So I think we got to keep that sense of reverence and duty to God and understand that we do have a duty to Him and an obligation, and even once we've met that obligation, we're still unprofitable servants.
Well, and we've got to strike the right balance between duty and desire, of course, and that we should want to serve God. But yes, if we have that sense of duty, I think where you would lose the sense of I need to do this or I feel obligated to do this is when we start thinking that we are superior or equals to God. And that is a challenge that a lot of society deals with. And if I'm not inferior to something, then why am I obligated to serve it or to worship it? So I think that can be the challenge, and we've got to make sure that we do have that sense of obligation and duty. We owe this. This should be something we serve, but also it should be something we desire and want to do. Like I said, it's created in us. That word in Acts 17:23, it means actually to act piously towards. That is the one that Paul uses right here in verse 23, where he says, "For while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, therefore what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you." It's acting piously towards. So let's also explore you guys have touched on several of them actually, and that's part of why I want to do that exercise, is to see what we had touched on. I'm not going to pronounce these Greek words, so do what you want in your own head. Making obedience, in other words, reverence and honor to someone greater. Now, this is in the context of worship, so it's more meaningful, but you could apply this concept to several things. Like he just mentioned a boss at work. Military immediately comes to mind. Anything where there's ranking or where you should be honoring. We shouldn't really revere any other person. We should only revere God, but we shouldn't revere people, but we can honor and obey other people. Again, like that kind of idea that I mentioned, when we start to think that we're as good as God, God's not greater, that's a problem, and that's where worship can start to fall off for people. Another one, not going to pronounce, feeling of awe in their presence. Now, the word awe is a word that we have distorted and manipulated, and your lexicon these days might say something else about, maybe deep admiration or something like that. The concept of awe goes way beyond that. Really, the original concept of awe was essentially, I'm falling on my knees, I am just blown away. This I can't even fathom. So when we say awesome, man, that's awesome. That pizza was awesome. We're really using an extremely flippant, wrong way. I'm not saying sinful. I'm just saying that's not the way the word was ever intended to be used. Truly, God is the only thing that is awesome. That should be filling us full of awe. But, again, you take it out of the worship context, and you could have a feeling of awe in the presence of another individual, right? When you water it down the way we have. But really, when you take awe to its extent and what it should mean, God should be the only one that we are in awe of, just blown away by. We've got reverently bowing our knees before. So I couldn't help it. My mind, I don't know why, it goes to Indiana Jones too much. Part of it is we're watching a series with the kids, not like the young Indiana Jones. But I just think of the penitent man will pass when we are talking about this from the Last Crusade. But the idea of it demands your respect. It demands you getting down low, prostrating yourself, bowing yourself before, humbly offering our lives in sacrificial service. Again, you take this out of the worship context, and you could do this in several regards. You could make a strong argument that this is really what a good marriage should entail, both ways, basically submitting yourself to the other person and being sacrificial, putting their needs before yours. Put it in the worship context, though, and what we're talking about is dedicating our lives. It's no longer I that live, it's no longer me, but Christ that lives in me is the idea. And we are dedicated to worshiping and that purpose. And then lastly, establishing a pattern of life consistent with our worship. I think this one, of all those, we might be like 1, 2, 3, 4, check, 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 check. That's easy. I got that. You get to this one, it's where the rubber meets the road, right? This has to do with our example. This has to do with the way that we live our lives. This would be us making sure that we are conducting ourselves in a way that is always constantly honoring and giving glory to God. Why should people see our good works? So that they will give glory to our Father in heaven. It's not about us. And so establishing that pattern of life consistent with our worship can be the most challenging aspect for sure. So I'm going to ask the question, who gave us a definitive statement about true worship? Okay, James did, for sure. Which one are you thinking of specifically?
Visit the orphans and widows in their affliction, and keep yourself unspotted from the world, and to control your tongue.
This is pure and undefiled religion, is how he puts it. I thought that one might come up, yeah, and that's a good example of pure and undefiled religion, and it has to do with service. And again, it's going to be letting your light shine, showing God.
John chapter 4, for the woman at the well says, verse 23 says, but the hour is coming, and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth.
Yes. Yep, so John 4, verses 20 through 24, our fathers worshiped on this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. This is the Samaritan woman speaking. Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. Well, where will we worship? That's the immediate question she's going to have. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, now is, when the true worshipers, and hopefully that's us, will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people, the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So what all can we understand and extrapolate from what Jesus said about worship in John 4? There are several things we could go over. We could talk as long as we've already talked in class about that. But just a couple of quick things. What do you take away from it, Caleb?
Beautiful the building is, it doesn't mean that we're worshiping.
Okay, so the building's insignificant, and it doesn't matter how grand or amazing the facility we may meet in is. It doesn't necessarily mean we're worshiping. We could be vainly acting. Did I see a hand over here? No? Okay. You don't even need a building. Yeah, absolutely. And, Jesus was alluding to that. He didn't completely flesh all that thought out right there, but he let her know it wasn't going to be what it used to be. And then he gave the idea of that it doesn't really matter. It's spirit and truth. It's what you're doing and how you're doing it, not where you're doing it. So you're talking about a balance between spirit and truth? Yeah. So Tyler's been reading my notes. It's the second time in a row. But what does it mean to worship in spirit? What does that truly mean? We're told that, well, I'm going to back up. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So what does it mean to worship in spirit? What does it not mean? Either way, I'll go either way.
You can have a worship that's totally influenced by the body, where you're just appealing to the emotions and the senses, or you can be most influenced by that spirit that God gave us, in which we're connecting with God.
Yeah.
That's the spirit.
So we're creating a connection with God that had been mentioned before, and the idea is it's a mental connection, and we're doing it to please Him and to serve Him, and it's not we're serving some sort of carnal idea or need. I'm going to keep you for 4 more minutes, like I said. We're not serving a carnal or fleshly need. It's not about our emotions. And a lot of times people get that confused. And they think that worshiping in spirit, whereas it should be an emotional thing for you because you should be in awe, reverence, but it's not about pleasing yourself and just getting all warm and fuzzy and excited, in a way that makes you feel good. It's not just about emotion.
Things here that first, when you worship in spirit, it means that there's nothing in front of you, like an idol, because you can't see a spirit. This is something that they would understand. You can't see a spirit. So when you're worshiping in spirit, it means you're not bowing down to this rock in front of you, because that's not the spirit. And then the other thing is that the spirit can be anywhere. So it doesn't matter where you are, you always have the ability to worship.
And it goes back to that connection in mind that, you're right, we can't see God in front of us. We know He's everywhere, and we know that, He's even in us, but we can't see Him physically. So there's an act of faith, there's an act that we're connecting in our mind, and then as well, we can do it, as we already talked about, we can do it anywhere.
Spirit and truth is joined together right in the middle of our company conjunction. And they both go the same way. You can't uncouple them.
Yeah.
You can worship in spirit all you want to, but if it's not in truth, it's useless.
I love the point that Lee just made, and I was going to ask this question too. I think we know this one pretty well, but Lee said that they've got a very important conjunction between them, spirit and in truth. It's not one without the other. I can worship in spirit all day long, but if it's not true worship, it's not following the prescribed example, then it's vain. But I could worship following the exact things that I'm supposed to, prescribed by the Bible, and if I have not dedicated my heart and my mind to it in any way, it's vain worship. We've got to have both aspects of it for sure. You want one more thing?
Israel in the Old Testament, specifically in the wandering years, that they followed the law, exactly, but there was no worship in it.
Yeah.
Their hearts were not in it. They were just following what they were told to do.
Well, and that was evident by the fact that they were very quick to go to polytheism. They weren't in awe of God, of Yahweh, and they would seek those lesser gods, for sure. This is really, go ahead, Harvey. This is a thought I'm leaving you with.
The question I was going to ask, why do we worship Him?
Why?
Then come back. We hadn't talked too much about this tonight. He's deserving of everything that we can give Him.
Yeah, so Harvey says, why do we worship God? Because He's deserving of everything that we can give Him. There's nothing that we can give to God more than what He's given us. And God deserves our worship and our praise. I'm certainly glad, I've said it before, that God doesn't give me what I deserve. But I want you all to think just about how can we and how should we worship God. Just think about that as you're going home tonight and everything. Just all the stuff that we've talked about. What does it really truly mean to worship, and how can you? And there's many ways that we didn't even cover tonight. So thank you very much for your time. I hope we can interrupt every Bible class with a baptism. Don't forget to hug David.